Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, Reeling in Holistic Health, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I'm your host, Coach Rice, and I want to make sure that you tune in every Monday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where I have my special guest on to talk about real issues that matter most. I want you to check us out on YouTube, Facebook Live, on Business Facebook page, also on the Be Awesome Network. Stay tuned. I think you're going to really like this next guest. Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I am your host, Coach Rice, and with me today I have Linda Feig Knipe, and she is a retired counselor, educator, and active volunteer. So Linda, tell us, where are you from and how did you embark upon your journey in counseling?
Oh, wow. So I was one of those um, enthusiastic people. I had a lot of students like that who were just so excited about doing so many things in life. And so even when I went to college, I was good in art and theater, and I started out in programs for that and happened upon psychology. And it was like, man, that was my thing. And I loved psychology, but as a lot of young people find, when you get out with just a bachelor's degree in psychology, you don't quite know what you're supposed to do. So I was social worker, and then I moved around to some other jobs um, where I got a lot of experience. I worked for a magazine for a while, but ended up as a Red Cross director, part time in a small chapter. And from there, I started working in the schools on a grant because I saw that a lot of the people I was seeing at the Red Cross office were just people who had made unfortunate decisions in their lives about what they were going to do. And so I started back into the schools working on that, working on people on the career choices that students were making and finding what their interests and passions were. So that's how I started back into the schools. And that didn't come until I was close to 40. And I'd
Okay.
always been involved with Red Cross. I was an instructor and a water instructor, and I have that's really where my heart was. And so I was very excited to um, be selected as the next executive director for that. And I loved that job, but it was part time in the small chapter I was in. And I also found that there were people who were in need, and I felt like going back into the schools would
Okay.
address a lot of those issues.
And so you have you also an author and you have a book out. Tell
Yeah.
us about your book.
Um, I didn't write that until I was retired.
Okay.
And actually, my husband and I were both retired for a while, and my husband passed away. He got cancer and passed on. And I had always wanted to write, and I had the time, and it was good for me to dive into something. And there were I had had some experiences that I felt like I needed to pass on my learning. And so that I took a writing workshop and hammered out the basics of this book. And that's really, I think, that being alone and really being able to dive into a topic like I was able to do at that time, it was good for me, and it was a good time to do that.
And so the name of your it's a memoir and it's called Brave in Therapy, Great Berry Trauma and Triumph Journey over PTSD, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so what's your story behind writing that?
So When I was close to 40 when I started back in my graduate program
Okay.
um, for counselor education. And in the end of my first course, it was a small group of students who, for the most part, were working professionals who were back in college to become school counselors. And there were just a dozen of us in this class. And at the end of this class, the first one on theory, counseling theories, we were talking about counseling. And I asked a question about, based on my experience, about if there was a time when uh, being in therapy would feel worse. And the uh, professor got kind of quiet and he said, well, in the situation where someone has a rape or sexual assault in their background that they haven't dealt with and it's gone on, he said, therapy is going to feel worse before it gets better.
Hmm.
And that was the situation. That had been a situation in my life. I had been the victim of a rape when I was in my early 20s and had tried therapy, which was what precipitated the question. It wasn't a good fit. And so I just moved on with my life. But
Hmm.
when he said that, it triggered full blown PTSD by the time I left the class that night. I got in
Wow.
my car and I started having re-experiencing symptoms right away. And it got to the point where I felt like I was crazy. And after a couple of weeks, I contacted him. The class was over and went back and talked to him about what was going on. And he, it was a first class. We had never talked about PTSD or anything. And he explained what was happening to me and explained that in that situation, when you're triggered and re-experiencing, that you can't just shut it off like you're trying to do, and you really need to deal with it in therapy. So,
Absolutely.
so that's how I ended up in therapy.
Okay. Okay. And you know what, when you think about it, do you believe that you buried a lot of those emotions and memories before you, when you had the moment where you went into PTSD?
It after the rape, you mean?
No,
Or
after the class, you went into full blown PTSD. Do you think it had a lot to do with you burying your emotions and memories and
oh,
not getting the help
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
not getting the help you need?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, the memories, the PTSD memories are incorrectly stored. Like they're not properly filed. Uh, like if you think of a filing cabinet where you put all of the papers for a particular subject into the file, and then you put it
Right.
in the category of the filing cabinet where it belongs. But with when something traumatic happens, and it's some people will talk about it and think about it and put a narrative to it and process what's gone on until the point where they have put a narrative to all of the feelings and they're able to properly store it. Some people do that. Some people, me, it was really uncomfortable to think about. Every time I thought about it, it was just, I was overwhelmed. And so I just shoved it away and moved on with my life. And when that happens, it's like shoving papers into a file cabinet without looking anywhere where they're supposed to be going. And then as you going to get out a file for something, all of a sudden all of these papers
All the it's everywhere, right?
pulling out. Yeah, that they were just shoved in there with this, the stuff you have to go in and get. So It's kind of what happened to me when I asked about therapy and he mentioned the word rape, and all of a sudden, all of those
All of
papers
the papers.
flying out. And it's
I
funny.
love the analogy you use because that is exactly what happens.
Yeah, it's so usually I will explain what, how you store memories, and it's pretty much what I said, but I love this way that someone who wrote a white paper, and this was 25 years ago that I read this, so I don't remember who wrote it, but described memory as biology plus biography equals memory. And the biology is the sensations that you experience in your body. And the biography is the narrative that you put to it, the story and the words. And you put those two things together and you file them properly in your mind where they belong. And when you don't do that and you just shove emotions away, then emotions come popping out at the weirdest times that don't seem to relate to anything because they're just shoved there. And the other thing is that, all of those sensations that we have, um, the emotions kind of are generated by the amygdala, um,
Mhm.
which I had a professor who described it as being like an operator who, takes the emotions in and then puts them where they belong. But when you're not doing the uncomfortable work of actually thinking about them, processing them, and putting a dialogue to them, they kind of stay there, and it's always kind of on high alert, waiting to protect you. And the kind of sensations that you often feel are things that are like, look out, this is about to happen. It's designed to protect you, but it's like
It's
sensations are
like
going
danger, danger.
right, and sensations are going off all over the place, which is why people that struggle with PTSD um, just feel crazy a lot of times and can be very irritable. It's really difficult to
Right.
struggle along that way. So,
Yeah, because that's a lot to hold on to, right?
yeah.
During that time, did you experience any suicide ideation?
As I got into therapy, I went into therapy, and I was very um, very reluctant to talk for a lot of reasons, and it's a lot what I talk about in my book. A lot of people just keep their feelings to themselves and power through because they're strong and smart, and they figure that they can handle things themselves. And I was very reluctant to let go of that control and talk to my therapist. And I felt like if I started talking, that then people would know what I was thinking about, and I didn't want people to know what I was thinking about because it generates this kind of beating yourself up. How can you think that? How can you be so stupid? And you don't want other people to look at you that way, so you just shut up. Um, so so I was working on um, the feelings that I had through um, from the sexual assaults and the rapes, and there was one earlier when I was in college with date rape. I didn't identify it as a rape at all until I was well into therapy, that I
Okay.
realized there were several. And I went into therapy going, I'm never going to talk about that because I was so stupid to put myself in a position where I got taken advantage of, and I was really embarrassed about that. I was humiliated. And I was one of the reasons I didn't want to talk, because I didn't want anything to come out that might embarrass me. So there was a lot that I was hanging on to, and it took a really long time um, for things to come out, bits and pieces. And I talk about the structure of therapy and how you heal in therapy, really through a lot of dialogue between my therapist and me. and going back and forth. Things come out, they don't come out in order, and sometimes you have to go back to things before you really can process them and put them away. But in all of that, I really started struggling as things came out, about how terrified I really was. It was a stranger rape. Somebody broke into my house, um, and I didn't realize until I talked about it in therapy that I was afraid for my life, and I thought that I could be murdered in the next few
Mm.
months. And I didn't know that. And after I revealed that in therapy, it was a shock to me and it was a shock to him. But then after I went home, I was like, oh my gosh, I talked about something important and I felt better. And then depression hit, and
Mm.
I struggled with depression for a long time. And so I did have suicidal ideation at that time. And I was going to therapy quite a bit at that point. I was also working full time in a graduate program, and I had 3 little boys at home,
Oh, wow.
and a
That's
marriage
an overload.
that was kind of on the rocks. So
Oh, goodness. Oh, you had a lot going on.
I had a lot of stressors. And when I would go to the Barnes and Noble bookstore, and I finally bought a workbook on anxiety and stress, and they had
Mhm.
like a chart of all of the things and like a number amount, and I was adding them all up, and I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I have anxiety and depression, and my stressors are just multiplied through the roof.
Right.
And I worked as a school counselor with students who struggled with PTSD, and having all of those stressors is not unusual, for people in that situation. I think it's
Right.
the reasons why they get so triggered, um, and why it is so impossible to deal with it, because there's just way too much going on.
So you had two separate incidents where you were raped.
Yeah.
And so, um, and while you were in therapy dealing with depression and anxiety and all of these things at once.
Yeah.
How did therapy help you?
Um,
Or did it help you at that time?
oh, absolutely. I think, for starters, it is really important to have a therapist that you feel confident in, that you can trust. And even then, um, it took me a long time to really not only to trust him, but to trust myself and be brave enough
Mm.
to be brave enough to talk, which is one of the things that I discovered in talking to people who read my book, is that a lot of people, um, really resonate my my talking about what it's like to keep secrets from people, because you're just beating yourself up about them. Not because you're trying to keep secrets, but just because you're
Right.
embarrassed about things, and so you won't talk about
The
them.
shame.
You just have shame about things. And a lot of times it can be business stuff, it can be family stuff, and you're just too ashamed to talk about them. And that stuff is toxic. And what I learned in therapy was that when I started talking, I would feel like I was having little, I this is how it felt. And I gave the book to my therapist before I published it, and he said, "Oh, I
Mhm.
don't like that um, analogy," but it felt like I had little ice pick holes punched into the armor of my body, so that fresh air was coming in. I would literally feel like fresh air was coming through little holes in the armor.
Oh, wow.
but that's what it felt like, is that holes were being punched in.
Hmm.
I did rewrite that, but that's what it felt like. And I would feel fresh air. It was the weirdest feeling. And it felt like, I describe it as, imagine what it's like for prisoners, inmates who are in solitary confinement. And if somebody were able to poke holes to the outside and they could get fresh air in their cells.
Oh my God, how
That's what,
refreshing that could be. Yes.
that's what it was like.
Mm.
To actually start talking in therapy. But it took a long time. My therapist was very clear with me that he was not going to direct the therapy, I because when you are assaulted, anytime you have a trauma situation
Mhm.
that results in PTSD, you are feeling totally out of control. I mean, you are out of control. But
Right.
then after that, it is just super important that you want to hang on to control. And a therapist who tries to take control or direct your session, like because I wasn't talking, he certainly could have stepped in and said, well, let's talk about this. And he just would not do that. And I had to learn to open up about whatever was on my mind, and that it was always okay. And it took a
Yes.
long time of saying things and finding out that it was okay, and that honestly I felt better, and he was very nurturing when I would talk about things, and so it felt really better to start talking. So the and you were asking about the healing journey,
Hmm.
and there were so many parts to it. Like, I had really cut myself off from my emotions, and so I journaled all the time. Couldn't sleep at night, and I would wake up. I couldn't go to sleep, and so I would write, and then I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would just be ruminating. And so a lot of times I would get up and I'd write. When I started finally identifying emotions, or when I was writing, I would have to look up words about emotions in the dictionary to define them, to figure out what I was feeling and to be able to describe it. And so I had this long, long vocabulary list in my journal of emotion feeling.
Mm.
So that was like, the journaling part of it was an entire chapter in the therapy portion of the book, which is the main
Okay.
portion of the book, because the journaling was where I could really start being honest about my emotions, even when I couldn't talk, when I couldn't reveal that to even my therapist. I was talking about it in the journal. And
Okay.
when I was finally able to take some of what I was writing in the journal, because I would go into sessions and I would sit there and not be able to talk. So it was just quiet. And that was excruciating. And so when I was on the ball enough to make
Hmm.
notes ahead of time before I went into therapy, it would get us started on talking about things, and then it would always go into areas where we really needed to talk.
Okay.
But there are a lot of tricks to, how you can be more effective in therapy by doing those kind of things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, with this amazing book, what would you like the audience to learn from this book, or the readers? What is the main thing you would like for them to get out of this book?
Um, a few things. One of them is that keeping your thoughts in your head, even if you're like terribly embarrassed by them and you've been beating yourself up, um, that they're toxic. Not
Mhm.
not saying it to somebody is toxic to you. And the problem is that when you tell people what you're thinking, they will oftentimes, and you need to pick your people well.
I
But
think so too. Yes, absolutely.
oftentimes they will tell you situations that they've been in that were just like what you're talking about or worse. And the other thing is that you'll get other perspectives. And when you just when you just ruminate on things that are upsetting you, or you're angry at yourself about, the only perspective you're getting is your own. And when I would finally tell my therapist things that I was really embarrassed about, he would always have a perspective that I had never considered that totally changed the way I looked at it. I
Mm,
was so embarrassed about what had happened and the position I put myself in on the date when I was in college that I could not talk about it. And when I finally realized that if I didn't talk about it, I wasn't going to get better. So
right.
I wrote it out. I wrote it in the third person, and I started to read it to him that way because I couldn't say it. And then I felt stupid because we both knew I was talking about me. So I finally started telling him what happened in the first person. This was like a year and a half into therapy.
Mm,
And I finally told him everything, and he asked a few questions, and then he said, "So how old were you?" Now I'm a 40 something woman at this point.
okay.
And I said, I was 19. And he said, "So you were a kid."
Hmm.
And we don't think of ourselves
Right. We
in
don't.
ages. And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "How many kids do you know that do stupid things?" And I was like, "All of them." But it was like I was beating myself up as though I had been a a fully formed adult who had made a dumb decision, which I could have done as a fully formed adult, but it was much less likely. And I was judging myself, but I wasn't looking at myself as having been a kid. I wasn't giving myself any grace. And
Right.
he gave me grace. And he let me look at that situation with a grace
Hmm.
never would have experienced if I hadn't told him.
Yes.
So that is one thing, that just um, holding all of that poison inside of you is toxic, and that you don't have to feel that way. Another thing I want people to understand is that I I had I wouldn't wish a rape on anyone, but it's not the worst thing that's ever happened in the world. And everybody has really hard things in their life. It's not the same as my hard things, but it is
Right.
really hard stuff in their life. And that's where we learn the most. You know,
Hmm.
I didn't learn a whole lot by this situation. I learned a whole lot by going to therapy. And I would sit there going, and it was the hardest thing I ever did. The rape, going to court, I did all of that after the break-in and rape. And
Oh, wow.
that was a really hard period of my life, but it was not
Hmm.
as hard as facing myself in therapy. And yet I would sit there going, I am learning so much. And when I got through it, and when I really came out healthy on the other side, I
Hmm.
was so grateful to have had that experience in my life. I wouldn't want to change anything about my life, because it has allowed me the opportunity to grow and learn in ways that we don't have when we stay comfortable.
Exactly.
So you don't grow in confidence. You don't grow when you're staying comfortable. And so those hard times, if you face them head on, they help you to grow and learn in ways that you would never if you weren't brave. And,
Right.
and one of the other things that I discovered, and a number of people said this, that they would go to therapy over something, and then as soon as they felt like it was put away, they would quit therapy.
Yep.
And I had several people say to me, I didn't understand until I read through the whole story of you really healing and becoming the person you always wanted to be,
Mm.
the authentic version of you, that you have to stick it out.
Yes. A lot of
You
people
don't
don't think about that.
feel better and then quit. You have to stick it out if you want all of the real um, benefits
Hmm.
of therapy. So there are a lot of I wrote um, the middle portion of the book is called therapy, and it really starts with all of the arguments you make to yourself about not wanting to go. And I have always said, if a thought has even crossed your mind that maybe therapy would be good for you, therapy would be good for you.
Exactly. I agree.
And that, about how to go about finding a therapist and how to make more effective use of your sessions so that you're not sitting there like I was, um, just not talking. And my
Hmm.
therapist gave me a lot of suggestions of things I might do that would help me, but I was
Right.
just,
But you still had to talk it out.
I still
You
had
had intense therapy.
I had to get there on my own. And I did talk about the really dark days of depression and the suicidal
Hmm.
ideation. And then finally, the realization that if I didn't talk about the really hard things, that I was not going to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of
It,
and I talked a lot about the stuff that I thought about, societal things, how we train our kids to talk about, part of it was not wanting to talk about my body and sex and creating
mhm.
visualizations about because women are so ashamed of their bodies. And that's the thing that we, even if you're not ashamed of your body, you're still ashamed of creating images, or things are putting thoughts in people's head about stuff that you might do. It's just,
Right.
it's
It's not an open conversation.
it's not an open conversation. And those are really difficult things. But in addition, we don't really, I know this from being a school counselor, that our kids will talk about sex, but um, it is never real, respectful, thoughtful
Right.
conversations. It can be crass and joking and
Hmm.
judgmental,
Derogatory.
derogatory. Yeah. And we don't do a good job of training girls or boys to talk about sex. And so then you can get into sexual situations where we haven't taught, they're in sexual situations, but we haven't talked to them about how to talk about it. I talked to so many young girls who were in sexual situations, and when I said, if you're going to be if you're going to be doing it, you need to be talking about it. And they were like, I could never talk about it with them. And it's
Right.
like, that's just, we haven't taught them.
That's true.
And we haven't taught guys how to read women. They still, we can be old men, they still don't know how to read us. So we need to be better
It's
about,
something that need to be taught. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So all of that, um, yeah,
I
this
like how
is
you
a
named
long
it
way.
braving therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
What made you pick that name?
When I was in my grad program, I read a wonderful book by Scott Miller, PhD, called The Heroic Client. And he gave all of the grace to the client for the work they had to do, and that if they were going to get better, that it was their heroic journey. And we are all on heroic journeys.
Yes.
And so that's where the title came from. It was just like, how can I say that in a different way? And I mean, that is, and people have said that's the perfect title,
It's
Braving
the
Therapy.
perfect title, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Especially
then
going through intense therapy.
yeah, I quoted, well, and I wanted to say you've got to be brave to do it, and you've got to be brave to stick it out.
Yes.
It is a heroic journey. And it was funny because one of the things that made a big difference to me, I was very uncomfortable when I decided I had to write about this date rape. It was a very unflattering position that I had put myself in. And I thought, okay, I'm far enough down the road that I don't care if other people read it, but I'm a Rotarian, all of these professional business people, and they heard I was writing a book, and it was like, great, as soon as you're done with the book, we're going to have you come in and talk about it to all your fellow Rotarians. And just the thought of that is like,
I know, right?
I can talk to people I don't know about it, but talking to people I know in my own neighborhood. And so I was listening to Brene Brown. She had a Netflix special. I think it was called The Call to Courage. And she talked about the fact that she was working with some Silicon Valley executives, and she said, I could not get them to understand that what I was saying to them is, if you are going to do big things, you will fail. You will. It's a given. You can't be successful all the time. And she said they were always saying, if, well, we might fail. And it's like, no, you will fail. And that was a statement that she made, that it was like, oh, I could fail, and that's okay, because
It takes the pressure off.
I want to do this thing. I want to live in the arena and do the big thing. And if you tell me if I'm going to live like that, I'm going to fail, okay, let's bring it on. And so that was huge for me in just going, I need to tell this story. I need to tell it the way it was, because there are a lot of women, there are a lot of people who
That
are
need to hear
so
it.
mired in their own shame about something they may have done, that they need. And I talked about what rape really is, and the fact that it may not even be prosecutable, but if you feel like you were raped, you need to deal with it, because that's trauma. And I had to talk about that. That was really important. So anyway, after the book was published, I decided to see if there were any other people that actually even use the word braving. Brene Brown, Braving the Wilderness. And I write this big, in the introduction, I write this big thing about Brene Brown, because it's where I really got my courage, and one of my catchphrases, she says, every morning I wake up and I'm saying to myself, today I'm going to choose courage over comfort. And that is become really my driving phrase. And so then to find out that I was like, I really didn't steal this from you, Brene. I was like, I didn't know until the book was published that other people
that other people wrote it.
And it was her.
But it's still different, because you got therapy, braving therapy is different. So but I mean, I really thank you so much for sharing and removing the shame around talking about these things, because that's what a lot of people need. And a lot of people do hold their emotions and what they've been through inside, and it is toxic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It causes health problems.
Yes, it
And
does.
because you can't sleep, you're not living a life that you could be possibly living if you were free.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been over 20 years since just about 20 years since I really was done with therapy. And I still see my therapist maybe once or twice a year just to
Hmm.
check in and things. But I'm kind of getting to a point now where I really felt like I had become my true self. I was really self-aware when I walked away from the regular sessions and stuff. But I still work on things. I was just recognizing just this past weekend how physically some certain conversations were making me feel, and suddenly I'm becoming more aware of like my physical responses to things, and I'm starting to be much more true in what I'm saying, and I have finally stopped trying to be responsible for other people's emotions. If I have
Praise
something
the
to
Lord.
say, if I have something to say, I'm nice about it, but I'm going to tell you, and I'm not going to try and soften it by taking on your emotions and what you might be feeling. Your emotions are your responsibility,
Exactly.
and so I'm still
Setting
learning.
boundaries.
I'm still learning. Yeah.
But that's setting boundaries I think that's a lifelong journey because there's so many layers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I think that I know exactly what you're talking about when you say taking on other people's responsibilities.
Yeah, you tell people something you know is going to be hard for them to hear, and then you start saying, "I'm so sorry that this might
Right.
be, that this might hurt you. You're really a wonderful person and you've got lots to offer." And man, that female tendency to apologize to everybody,
Yes. Yes.
it's like, stop being
Stop
responsible for other
apologizing.
people. Let them be responsible for their emotions.
Exactly, because you can't be responsible for their emotions.
Right,
And
right.
I think that's the whole fallacy of it is
Yeah,
people think that they are responsible and they're not.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and people are not responsible for your emotions. So,
exactly. Yeah.
well, Linda, it's been such a wonderful time talking to you and about, just your journey in your book. And so glad you wrote it. And I will have the link so that people can order the book and read it for themselves. I will have it in the video as well.
Oh,
And
great.
and so people can reach out and find out,
I
what's
really
going
appreciate that, Coach Rice, because I will fess up that I hate marketing. I am not good about going on social media and doing all of the hype stuff. And so any help that you can give me would be great, because
Oh
you
yeah,
know
because
what?
your book will be on your thumbnail.
There are a lot of reviews on my book, and it
Hmm.
wasn't the people that I thought would be reading it. It's just normal people that are going, "Oh, yeah, I do that too."
Right.
So, yeah.
And you'd be surprised, like you write a book, you'd be surprised who need it and
Yeah,
who will read it. It gets in the
yeah.
right hands, I'll tell you that. And we want to make sure that I will make sure that I put the link in. You're gonna have the picture of it on your thumbnail. Oh yeah, we're gonna market this book.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a
And so
really real delight talking with you.
I really enjoy talking to you too. It's such a wonderful time. And to my audience, I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. And if you know someone that can really use some healing and resilience in their life and so they can see how important it is to express their emotions, please do share this video and please do subscribe to my channel. As I always tell you, I always have amazing people. I never let you down. And so just please share and follow and comment and let us know what you think. And so until then, you have a fantastic Monday. It's your time to shine. Your journey to chart. Coach Rice wisdom will heal every heart. So join us now. Let's make life survive.
Some Mondays with Coach Rice.